Welcome guys, I'm Gio here, hope you're having a great day, and in this video we talk about some error handling in Angular. So when we build our Angular app and it's deployed, we have something like this. On one hand we have our app loaded into browser, and on the other hand we have our backend, our API, maybe we have some MongoDB, Node.js, it doesn't matter. The thing is we have some backend here which supports our application. It doesn't exist in isolation. Lifecycle of our app looks like this. So user loads the browser, then during the interaction our app sends some requests to the backend. It is usually done through HTTP, and then we receive some response, make UI adjustments, and then repeat. And this is how it works in general. Sometimes during this interaction errors can happen. Maybe API is not reachable, maybe there is something going on with database, maybe our request is wrong. The thing is, we should always expect that there is a possibility that our request will fail, and we should build our application in a way that is expecting that and that is able to handle them properly. Now, there are different UX strategies to apply when we receive different errors, and based on the context and the action, we can have different things displayed to the user. The most basic way to handle errors is that for every request in your app you have some error handler, and when error happens you just display some toast or some message some kind, and you're done with the request and let the user know that okay, it has failed, maybe retry again, or display some appropriate message. But in this case I want to suggest you a different strategy that can work certain types of requests. But first, let's talk about different standards that we have and conventions and how that can be useful. When we have this interaction going on with our app and backend, usually APIs are built with REST standard. Each request has its response, and response will contain the code, and each code has different meaning. Now, some applications might completely ignore that, and this is not true for all the applications out there, but this is convention. And if you're following that, that's good, because a lot of companies and a lot of projects follow that, and you can expect such a meaning. I've seen projects where the API only returns 200 code, even though there are some errors and maybe there is some validation going on. But this is a specific case, and we can handle it after we discuss this strategy. In this video, we are interested in server errors. So server errors can happen for many reasons. Maybe database is down, maybe there is some update on the backend, maybe there is some bug for specific method and it just throws some runtime exception, etc., etc. We don't know. But in this case, from Angular application perspective, we can handle server errors differently. Usually when we receive some error, we just fail the request and say to the user, okay, it has failed. Now in this case, when the server error happens, another good strategy might be to give server some time, maybe a couple of seconds, and then retry the request again. So let's say we have this scenario where we want to display the list of news or games or something, and we are requesting this list. Our request fails and we receive 500, meaning there is some error there, some server error. Now if we give some time to server, maybe a couple of seconds, then we might actually get the response, and we'll be able to display it to user instead of just showing the error and saying that okay, it has failed and our page doesn't work. And we can do this maybe a couple of times, and if server still doesn't respond or still request is still failing, then we can do nothing here and we will display the error message. With server errors, it makes sense to give a chance to server to maybe recover from something that is going on here and then retry request a couple of times with some intervals. Now, For some errors, it makes no sense to repeat. Let's say we have some validation error in our input, no matter how much we try, this will always fail, and such errors should be handled differently. But here in this video, we talk about the server errors. As I've talked before, some servers or some APIs might completely ignore this convention, and maybe you have some different ways to identify that the request failure reason is a server error, and that's okay. You can do that, but let's discuss this strategy first. I have some small setup here. I have app component, and I have created some very simple server that returns current time. It is running on my local machine, and sometimes it returns the result, sometimes it is failing. So we have app component there, and the template, we display the time, and then we have a load time method that makes the actual request. Let's look at this in the browser now. When we load the page, we have something like this. Let's click the button, and as you see, this request failed. It is randomly generated. Error, we got the error. Let's try again. Maybe we get some proper response, and yeah, now this worked, and we got the response. Let's try again, and yeah, it has failed now, and yeah, this is random. So our server sometimes returns proper response, sometimes it is failing, and this will help us to test our implementation. Because we are using Angular and HTTP client that comes with it, the actual requests that we make are observables. And because they are observables, we can take advantage of rxjs and its operators. And to implement this retry strategy for this request, we're going to be using a retryWhen operator. Before we start implementation, let me explain how retryWhen operator works, so everything is clear, and then we will just go ahead and implement this strategy to retry the request a couple of times if something fails. So let's say we have some observable and we have some different operators applied to it, and we also have retryWhen operator applied to it. So if the values come in and there is no error, retryWhen does nothing. It just mirrors these values and sends it to the subscribers. And yeah, that's just how it works. Now, when the errors start to happen, that's where this retryWhen operator comes in. In this operator, we are passing in our custom function, custom notifier. And in this function, we receive errors observable. So whenever errors happen in our source observable, where this is retryWhen applied, we receive these errors here as observable sequence. Now this function here should return a new observable, our observable. We can build this observable however we want, but this is really important because based on this observable, retryWhen decides what to do when some errors happen. And there are a couple of things that can happen when we implement our custom observable here. So if this emits some value, it doesn't matter what value it is, then retryWhen operator will resubscribe to source observable, the one that it is applied on. In our case, because our source observable makes HTTP requests, when it will resubscribe to it, the request will be made again. So we retry HTTP requests. That's why these operators are so powerful. If this observable throws some error, then retryWhen will know that, okay, we're not going to handle this error here, and let me throw this. Maybe some other operator will handle this down the line, or maybe subscriber will take care of it. Or there's a third thing that can happen. Observable can complete, and then retryWhen will just complete the observable, and if subscriber is interested in complete event, it will get this notification. So this is how retryWhen operator works. Now let's go ahead and try to implement this into our code. Okay, first of all, let's add some variable to indicate the number of times we want to retry the request. Let's say in this case we want to retry 2 times. Now let's go ahead and add the skeleton for our retryWhen operator. Now, because our function here, or custom function, should return new observable, here I'm just going to return the errors and then handle each error separately and decide what I want to do with this error. So let me create the skeleton for that. Okay, here we are. For each error, now from our observable, we need to decide what to do with it. Now, I have some helper function here to identify the server error. It is just going to check if the error status is more than 500, but you can have any logic here, as I've said before. Now, if this error is a server error and we can retry this, and this number is still there, as is not 0, then we should definitely retry this. If not, we want to just throw the error and ignore it because, well, we have already tried it, or this is not server error, in which case we don't want to handle this. So let's go ahead and implement that. Okay, if this is a server error and we can try again, then we should retry here, and we need to write some logic in this line. And if that is not the case, then we want to throw the error. So how we do this? When we can use helper function from rxjs called throw error, and this throw error will just create new observable that throws error immediately. So let's handle that case first. Now, if this is the error that we don't want to handle, or we have ran out of try counts, then we need to throw the error because, well, we have tried already and it's not gonna change, and we decide that, okay, it's time to fail, and then maybe subscriber will handle it. And in this case, as I've said before, we use throw error helper from rxjs, and we are creating just the observable that throws the error and does that. Now, what should we do in the case when we want to handle the error? And this is where we take the advantage of rxjs again. First of all, when we try this request again, we want to decrease try count because we are trying to make request again. So let's do that. Now we need to make this retryWhen operator resubscribe to the source. I make this request. How we do this? Well, we need to return some observable that just returns the value and only does that. It doesn't matter what value is that. And we can do this many different ways, but here we also want to delay this new request. So when the error happens, we don't want to immediately repeat the request, but we want to maybe wait some time. And in this case, let's say we want to wait for 2 seconds and then retry request and see if server fixed itself and maybe request will work. So let's go ahead and implement that. Okay, this is how it looks. So we are using interval function from rxjs, and interval will create observable that emits values based on given interval that we have here, in this case 2 seconds. Now in this case we are only interested in the first thing, so first time whenever this emits the value. That's why we are using take operator, and we are just emitting the value after 2 seconds and then we are done with it. So what will happen here is that when error happens in underlying observable and we receive this error here as we are handling it, and we decide that we want to handle this, after that we are returning new observable, and this new observable will throw value after 2 seconds, and after 2 seconds retryWhen we'll know that, okay, this error is going to be handled and I'm trying to resubscribe to the source, so the request will repeat after 2 seconds. Now if errors happen again, we go through this flow again, and this is how it will work. Now let's check this and make sure it's working as expected. So here we are. Let's click the load time. Okay, as you see, it's error, but it still says loading. Now it has failed again, but it's still loading. And yeah, it worked. Perfect example here. So first request, it failed. Second request, it failed. But third time, it has worked, and we are displaying this. And instead of just throwing out the error to user and saying, oh yeah, no, your request has failed, now we have handled that in the background, and we have retried it a couple of times. So first error, second error, these are just random errors that my server is generating. And then third time, we've got the value, and it is working. Now let's clean this up and try again. And as you see, the request failed. First one, initial one failed. Then we have tried it 2 times and both of them failed. So we decide that, okay, we're not going to handle this, and it's error, and we display this to the user. But we have seen also the other case previously that, it was pretty viable. We have tried one time. First time it has failed, second time failed, and then it has worked, and yeah, we have implemented this strategy. Now, looking at this, some of you might be concerned because it's not really reusable, and you don't want to copy and paste all of this code here to implement the strategy for every request that you want this to. Now, we can extract this as a separate custom operator of ours, and we will do this right now. Now, in rxjs, there's a very nice function called pipe, and I'm sure you're already familiar with that, or at least the idea, but the pipe allows us to group together different combinations of operators and then later reuse them as one single chunk. So this is exactly what we're going to do right now. We have this function, retry server errors, and here we will just basically move all of these things into our pipe, and then we'll receive single function, single custom operator, and that will be reused in other places. So let's do that. So we have our retry logic here as a custom operator separately, and in our request we just apply this, and let's check that again and make sure that it works. Okay, it is working. It has retried the requests, and eventually we failed. Let's try again. And yeah, in this case it has worked, so that's nice. It's really good. Now we can reuse this operator in any other place with any requests, and we just have this small tiny function here. We can make it configurable to pass in try count or maybe time. We can even further customize it to provide the custom error checking function. So instead of is server error check, we can have our custom function here to pass through this, and we can do all sorts of things. Now, one catch here, because this operator can be applied to observable that is generating multiple different requests over time, we might want to reset try count to 2 or initial value, when success happens. So let's say we have some errors here, and this is handling that, and whenever error is fixed, let's say in our underlying requests, then we want to reset it back to 2. So let's add this addition here as well. And yeah, that way this operator is more robust at this point because it can handle different scenarios. Sometimes we can make one request, or we can make many different requests, and this is ready to handle that as well. So this is it. You can of course make it more complex and add your enhancements here, but this is up to you. This is some strategy. I have been using some kind of this here in real projects and for different requests, and it's been pretty successful so far. And yeah, that's it. Another advantage of that is that you don't have to use any interceptors or anything like that, or do some weird things, and you can just keep things very clean, very simple. If you want it for a certain request, you can just apply it by simply calling it, or you can just not use it, and well, that's very easy as well. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Click the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends.